हाय एवरीवन, दिस इज मानसी रतूरी। वेलकम टू माय चैनल। सो जैसा कि आप जानते हैं हम पॉलिटिकल थ्योरी सीरीज कर रहे थे। सो आज मैं बात करने वाली हूँ पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस के बारे में। सो गाइस, सबसे पहले मैं आपसे पूरी समरी शेयर करूंगी, जिसके बाद आपकी क्लैरिटी और अच्छे से इंक्रीज हो जाएगी। ओके, सो लेट्स बिगिन। देखिए, हम बात करें हैं पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस के बारे में। सो सबसे पहले हम बात करेंगे कि वॉयलेंस होता क्या है। वॉयलेंस मतलब होता है हिंसा करना, एक दूसरे को मारना, दंगे भड़काना, एक दूसरे को हार्म करना, तोड़फोड़ करना। ये सब किस में आता है? वॉयलेंस में आता है। ठीक है। बेसिकली स्टेट को किसका रीज़न माना जाता है? इनजस्टिस का। हमेशा इनजस्टिस का सोर्स माना जाता है स्टेट को, गवर्नमेंट्स को। गवर्नमेंट्स कई बार ऐसी पॉलिसीज़ लाती है जिनसे लोग खुश नहीं होते हैं। अलग अलग तरीके के लोग होते हैं हमारी सोसाइटी में, अलग अलग रिलीजन के लोग हैं, अलग अलग क्लास के लोग हैं, अलग अलग तरीके के लोग हैं। मेंटालिटी सबकी अलग अलग होती है और अलग अलग सबके इंटरेस्ट होते हैं। कई लोग ऐसे होते हैं जो एडजस्ट कर लेते हैं, बट कई लोग नहीं करते। कई लोग सोचते हैं चलो हम प्रोटेस्ट करेंगे, अपनी मांगे मनवाएंगे। लेकिन कई लोग ऐसे होते हैं प्रोटेस्ट के बहाने क्या करते हैं? पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस फैलाते हैं, यानी कि वॉयलेंस जो बहुत ज़्यादा फैलाते हैं, दंगे भड़काते हैं और एक दूसरे से ऐसी बातें करते हैं जिनसे कि पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस जो है बहुत ज़्यादा फैलने लगता है। और जिससे नुकसान किसका होता है? पब्लिक का। ओके, पब्लिक का नुकसान कैसे होता है? जब कोई भी, मान लीजिए कोई भी प्रोटेस्ट चल रहा है, उसमें वो बहुत ही पीसफुली चल रहा है, लेकिन सडनली क्या हो जाता है, कुछ लोग ऐसी बातें बोलते हैं उनसे कि वो जो पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट चल रहा था वो सडनली क्या हो जाता है? वॉयलेंट का रूप ले लेता है। सो पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस से आप क्या समझते हो? पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस वो होता है एक ऐसे ग्रुप एक्टिविटी को कहते हैं जिसमें लोगों की जो इंटेंशन सिर्फ दंगे भड़काना और इनका मोटिव लोगों को हार्म पहुंचाने का रहता है, चाहे वो तरीके कुछ भी हो। ठीक है। देखिए, एरिस्टोटल वाज द फर्स्ट पॉलिटिकल साइंटिस्ट हु डिस्कस द नेचर एंड कॉजेज ऑफ पॉलिटिकल डिसऑर्डर। एरिस्टोटल ऐसे फर्स्ट पॉलिटिकल साइंटिस्ट थे जिन्होंने पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस की नेचर के बारे में बात करी है कि किस तरीके से होता है पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस। ये सब, इन सब ने सबसे पहले फिलोसोफर यही रहे हैं जिन्होंने इसके बारे में बात करनी चाहिए। ठीक है। देखिए, अब बात उठती है कि पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस होता क्यों है। बेसिकली पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस स्टेट और उससे जुड़ी इंस्टीट्यूशंस के अगेंस्ट होता है क्योंकि लोग उनसे खुश नहीं होते हैं। ठीक है। अब बात उठती है कि क्यों, जब वॉयलेंस बहुत ज़्यादा होता है तो इसके अगेंस्ट कुछ किया जा सकता है या नहीं। देखो, स्टेट उन लोगों को पनिश कर सकता है जो उनके आदेशों का पालन नहीं करते, जो उनके डिसीजंस नहीं मानते, पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम को ख़राब करने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो पनिशमेंट मिलती है। हमारे पास पुलिस है, हमारे पास आर्मी है, सब उन्हें पनिश कर सकते हैं और इस वॉयलेंस को कम किया जा सकता है। देखो, आपने देखा होगा कि जब भी कोई राइट्स होता है या वॉयलेंस होता है तो पुलिस क्या करती है? टीयर गैस का यूज़ करती है ताकि इन सबको रोका जा सके, क्योंकि उनके पास सिस्टम को सही करने के राइट्स होते हैं। ओके, अब हम बात करेंगे पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस के रीजंस कौन कौन से हो सकते हैं। देखिए, सबसे पहले जनरल कॉजेज, concept of national self-determination, ideology, religious and ethnic conflicts, political conflict between different groups and elites। बहुत से अलग अलग तरीक़ों की वजह से पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस हो सकता है। जनरल कॉजेज में आप क्या आ सकते हैं? अगर महंगाई बढ़ गई, मान लीजिए डीजल पेट्रोल बढ़ गया, या कोई भी ऐसा, या कोई फार्मर लॉ भी रिसेंटली आया था जिस वजह से प्रोटेस्ट किए जा रहे थे, ये होते हैं जनरल कॉजेज। ओके, आइडियोलॉजी भी बहुत ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंस होती है। जब अलग अलग सोच के लोग होते हैं, कई लोग क्या करते हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा ऐसी बातें बोलते थे जिनसे दूसरे ग्रुप के लोग जो हैं वॉयलेंट हो जाते हैं। अलग अलग तरीके की बातें, दो धर्मों को लड़ाते हैं। एक पॉलिटिकल लीडर ही दो धर्मों को लड़ाने में बहुत ज़्यादा उन्हें पुश करता है कि वो आगे आए और लड़ें, अपने धर्म को बचाओ, ऐसे ये सब बातें करते हैं। ठीक है। देखो, एक रीज़न ये भी है पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस का कि जब दो धर्मों के लोग आपस में लड़ने लगते हैं। आपने देखा होगा हिंदू मुस्लिम कॉन्फ्लिक्ट कितने टाइम से चल रहा है। ठीक है। जब हम बात करते हैं कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स की, तो रिलीजियस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जो है वो इसलिए बढ़ता है क्योंकि जो लीडर्स होते हैं ना, वो उन्हें लड़वाते हैं। वो हमेशा ये दिखाने की कोशिश करते हैं कि इस देश में मुस्लिम सेफ़ नहीं है, हिंदू सेफ़ नहीं है। वो ऐसी बातें बोलती हैं जिसकी वजह से लोगों के दिमाग पर बहुत बुरा इम्पैक्ट पड़ता है। और ऐसा इसलिए होता है क्योंकि जब हम बात करते हैं एजुकेशन की, इंसान में जब नॉलेज की कमी होती है, एजुकेशन की कमी होती है, तो वो वही चीज़ देखता है जो उसे दिखाया जाता है। जब आप खुद से कोई चीज़ कोशिश करते हो, खुद से नॉलेज लेने की कोशिश करते हो, किसी चीज़ को समझने की कोशिश करते हो, ह्यूमैनिटी को सबसे पहले रखते हो, तो आप समझते हो कि रिलीजियस होने से बेहतर है आप ह्यूमैनिटी को सबसे पहले रखें। ठीक है, क्योंकि सब बराबर हैं। अगर हम धर्मों की बात करें तो सब बराबर हैं। कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि ये ऊंचा है वो नीचा है, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है। ये सब क्यों होता है? लीडर्स की वजह से। जब नेता लोग क्या करते हैं, आपको लड़ाने की कोशिश करते हैं, आपके दिमाग के साथ खेलने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस बढ़ जाता है। लोग सड़कों पे आते हैं, तोड़ फोड़ करते हैं, बसेस तोड़ते हैं, लोगों को मारते हैं, एक दूसरे से नफरत की तरह देखते हैं, बात नहीं करते, तो ये सब बढ़ जाता है। देखिए, कौटिल्य ने क्या कहा था कि गवर्नमेंट की गलत पॉलिसीज़ की वजह से ही वॉयलेंस जो है फैलता है। कैसे? जब गवर्नमेंट गलत पॉलिसीज़ लाती हैं, लोगों की वो पसंद नहीं आती और अलग अलग फिर ग्रुप्स बन जाते हैं। कुछ लोग शांति से अपने प्रोटेस्ट करते हैं, बट कुछ लोग जो है वॉयलेंस बहुत ज़्यादा करना चाहते हैं, तो वो सड़कों पे आते हैं और एक दूसरे को मारना पीटना शुरू कर देते हैं। ओके, और एक रीज़न और है इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस की वजह से भी पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस जो है बढ़ता है। देखिए, कई लोग होते हैं जिनके पास वैसा जॉब नहीं होता जो वो चाहते हैं, उनको काम नहीं मिल पाता, उनके साथ उनकी जो महंगाई इतनी ज़्यादा बढ़ जाती है, उनकी फाइनेंशियली नीड्स ज़्यादा पूरी नहीं होती हैं। ठीक है, जिसकी ब्लेम किस पे जाता है? गवर्नमेंट पे जाता है, गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसीज़ पर जाता है। ठीक है, कैसे जाता है? क्योंकि अगर हम गवर्नमेंट जॉब की बात करें, आपको तो पता ही है क्या प्रोसीजर होता है गवर्नमेंट जॉब का, इतना डिले। अब किसी का अगर एग्ज़ाम क्लियर हो भी जाएगा तो वो उसको भी बहुत वेट करना पड़ता है। ठीक है, सीट्स और प्राइवेटाइजेशन आजकल होता जा रहा है, गवर्नमेंट जॉब्स तो अब आने वाले टाइम पे ख़त्म ही हो जाएंगे अब। ठीक है, तो ये सब रीजंस भी हैं जो कि पॉलिटिकल वॉयलेंस को बढ़ाती है। ओके गाइस, दैट्स ऑल अबाउट द समरी। नाउ वी विल डिस्कस एवरीथिंग इन डिटेल्स। See guys, political violence is a collective violent action of a group of people against the government to highlight its discontent. It may be a protest against a particular policy of the government, it may be used to remove a particular government from power, or it may be taken recourse to for the change of political system. Aggression and violence have been a part of human history since long because men take to violence and aggression to secure things that they did not possess or to preserve things that they possessed. Normally, political violence is directed against the state, its property and men who manage its institutions. Political violence may begin with rioting or mass demonstration, but it is always possible that it assumes different forms. Aristotle was the first political scientist who discussed the nature and causes of political disorder. He pointed out that change in the balance of social forces in a particular state was responsible for political disorder. The Indian political thinker Kautilya Chanakya was of the opinion that change in the attitude of one's own people is revolt. It results from a wrong policy of the government and immodest behavior of the king. Thus, since ancient times, political violence had caused disorder in the state, and in modern times, the problem of political violence has become more marked and complex. Now, violence and state. We have seen in our discussion that political violence is largely directed against the state and its various institutions. Therefore, it is as old as the state itself. Violence is inbuilt in the institution of the state. It has a monopoly of coercive power in its hand. The state exercises this power with the help of its repressive agencies such as the army, the police, jails, and courts. It can punish people who do not obey its orders and who disturb law and order. The state claims authority to rule and it secures authority with the help of legal sanctions or popular sanctions. When the state exercises power, it is entitled to use legally sanctioned violence to enforce its order. More often than not, the state uses coercive methods which are not sanctioned by law. The degree of use of violence differs from the state to state because ultimately it depends on the ability of the state to secure compliance of its order without using coercion. Political violence and the process of economic development. Historically, we have seen that the state exercised violence in the early phase of economic development when there was a transition from a handicraft system based on agriculture to a relatively labor-intensive factory system. During this period, a great majority of population suffered because of this change. The state used extremely violent methods to curb agrarian revolts of the farmers who were agitating against unjust policies of the government. It used its authority to protect private industries by curbing the rights of workers and by declaring trade unions illegal. For example, during the Captain's Swing troubles in rural England in 1830, when agricultural machines were destroyed, animals killed, crops destroyed, and bricks burnt, the state arrested 1976 farmers, deported 481 farmers, and executed 18 farmers. Okay, in short, in the process of political integration and economic development, the level of political violence is extremely high. The state has considerably greater potential of internal violence than its citizens. Now, what are the causes of political violence? See, following are some of the causes of political violence. General causes, concept of national self-determination, ideology, religious and ethnic conflicts, political conflicts between different groups of allies, economic condition, and the concept of relative deprivation. Guys, I've already explained everything in details. I'm not repeating this topic again. Okay. Now, our next question is, what are the forms of political violence? There exist different forms of political violence which people use to show their resentment of dissatisfaction against the government. It can assume a form of a violent demonstration, or it can be a epoch making revolution like the French Revolution of 1789. We see the emergence of political violence in the following forms: violent protest by the people against the government, terrorism, military revolts and takeovers, revolts and rebellion, war. Now, first, violent protest by the people against the government. Normally, people take recourse to violence when all the constitutional means available to them fail. The violent protest of the people assume different forms. The violent protest of unorganized mobs cause a large-scale damage because they attack the symbols of government authority, such as government offices, railways, and buses. They try to disrupt the normal functioning of the government. This type of violence is sporadic in nature and it dies down after registering protest. But due to the violent rioting, the government tend to amend their policies to avoid the spread of violence. Next is terrorism. In modern times, terrorism has become one of the important forms of political violence, as a large number of young people join terrorist groups to bring about change in the government. The weapon of terrorism is used by terrorists because they know that they cannot launch an open war against the state, as the state has a superior force at its command. But terrorists are determined to use violent methods because it is their opinion that opponents understand the language of the gun. Okay, the power in society is also based on the gun. Terrorists use all the sorts of methods to teach a lesson to the state authorities. Their activities start with blowing up of the bridge or breaching a wall of a dam, but in the process they expand the area of their operation. They get involved in activities of sabotage, murder, killing a large number of people in sudden gunfire, hijacking of an aircraft or a bus, holding people for ransom, kidnapping, political assassination, extortion, setting fires to places of worship and markets, inciting caste and communal riots, etc. Now, military revolts and takeovers. In modern time, the military or the armed forces of the country are playing an important role in the policy of the third world countries because they are the only well organized force available in society which have not undergone the process of state and nation building. Okay, involvement of military in political violence assumes two forms: the mutiny of soldiers and military takeover, a coup d'etat. All over the world, disgruntled elements in the armed forces rebel against the government. This revolt is called mutiny. Due to some economic or political reasons, the soldiers take to arm and get involved in violent activities. For example, in 1857, the Indian soldiers of the army of British East India Company revolted against the British rule and killed a large number of their British officers. The second form of political violence is the military takeover, the engineering a coup d'etat. Military takeover in a sharp armed and secure action by a group of army officers to capture political power by establishing control over key installations of the state. It is well organized operation in which masses are bypassed. If coup leaders are confident of controlling the situation. Now, revolts and rebellion. We have seen that terrorist violence or even military revolts do not need the support of the masses. It is essentially an action carried out by a determined group of people, but revolts and rebellions take place because of popular disaffection. Revolts represent the anger of certain sections of society and they are aimed at changing the policy of the government or change in the government. The revolts may take place in different parts of the country and the demands of the rebels may be very specific. If the revolts are accompanied by a high degree of organization and with the tacit approval of wide sections of the population, one can say that they have assumed a serious form. It includes large-scale terrorism and civil war. The revolt may develop in a rebellion. Rebellion is the second stage of revolt in the sense that in this phase the rebels are ideologically committed and they have developed a vision of future society. Due to the normally socialist or nationalist ideology, they are supported by a large number of people. If the rebels are able to concentrate in a geographically peripheral area or the areas outside the efficient control of the state and if foreign support is available to them. Next, war. War is the culmination of political violence in the sense that war brings forth two contending forces face to face with each other and settles the issue on the basis of balance of armed forces. War is as old as human history and violence and bloodshed are at the heart of it. There are two types of war: war with the external enemy of the country and internal war which takes place between the state forces and rebels, which means civil wars. The external war causes widespread damage and destruction because both the parties use massive armies, modern weapons of mass destruction, and air force. The First World War accounted for 1 million deaths, and the Second World War was the most destructive of all wars. Atomic weapons were used by the USA to settle the issue. Internal war is fought between the forces of a central government and the secessionist forces. It could be a revolt by a certain sections of the people or a rebellion by the broad mass of the people. In the 1860s, the USA witnessed a civil war between the northern and the southern states in the issue of abolition of slavery. Internal war is equally destructive and may cause widespread destruction and massacre. We have examples of violent internal war in the Lebanon, Yugoslavia, Nigeria, and India. Political violence assumed different forms in modern times. Revolution also a particular form of political violence. Now, what is the meaning of revolution? Revolution is essentially a modern phenomenon because it wants to bring about a total transformation of society. Revolutions are marked by widespread violence, social unrest, and ideological commitment. The new revolutionary ideology is radical, rational, democratic, and universal. Modern revolution is not confined to replacing a bad ruler with a good one, but they have a modernist agenda of destructing the entire socio-political order by the legitimate representatives of the community. As we have seen, revolutions are aimed at changing the basic structure of society. They want to bring about a rapid transformation of the society's state and class structures. This is accompanied and carried through by the class-based revolt from below. Modern revolutions differ from the earlier revolts in the sense that the latter did not think of the basic changes in society and state, and they were more interested in change in the government. Modern revolution has its goals clearly defined and its leaders use violence to consummate it. Its leaders are backed by a well-defined theory which seeks to legitimize revolutionary violence. Now, what are the three phases of revolution? We can say that there are three distinct phases of revolution. The first phase of revolution is the classical phase, the second phase of revolution is the socialist phase, and the third phase of revolution is revolution third world countries. The classical phase of revolution began in England during the British Civil War of the 17th century that destroyed royal absolutism in England. It was followed by the French Revolution of 1789, which witnessed unprecedented violence and bloodshed. It destroyed feudalism in France and paved the way for the emergence of the modern capitalist society. The American Revolution ended foreign domination and established a modern constitutional democracy in USA. All these three revolutions transformed state organization, class struggles, and dominant ideologies. Okay. In the third phase, revolutions were witnessed in the third world countries. The Egyptian revolt of 1953 paved the way for the emergence of new politics in Arab countries. The Islamic revolution of the Iran in 1979 was the last of the Great Revolution, which tried to reorder Iranian society on the principles of radical Islam. Now, what are the theories of revolution? There are three distinct theories of revolution. These theories probe causes, goals, and consequences of revolution through light on the ideology that wins adherence of the people. The first theory of revolution is expounded by Ted Robert Gurr in his book Why Men Rebel. He says that revolution is a form of political violence and it challenges the monopoly of force possessed by the state. He is of the view that turmoil, conspiracy, and internal war are the three features of revolution. The main cause of disaffection and rebellion and relative deprivation of the people. The more intense of deprivation, the greater is the degree of violence. He thinks that at first there is discontent of the people, then there is politicization of discontent, and finally its accusation and violence against the state. Okay. C. Johnson tried to understand revolution as a systematic imbalance. He is of the opinion that revolution takes place due to the development of social imbalances and systematic disequilibrium. These imbalances are caused because of the changes in the values of people. The changes may also occur because of the environment within which the social system is located. Okay, the third theory of revolution is the Marxist theory, which believes in class warfare. According to Marx, our known history is the history of class struggle between haves and have-nots, and the contradiction between them come in the common. In the capitalist state of development, the capitalists exploit workers by extracting surplus value from the labor and cause widespread poverty and misery. As a result, class struggle between the capitalist and worker becomes intense. In the struggle, the state as an instrument of class rule supports the capitalist classes. The workers bring about a violent revolution. The purpose of the proletarian revolution is to overthrow the capitalist system and replace it with the socialist system. Establishment of a classless and stateless society is the ultimate goal of the social revolution. All these three theories point out that violence plays an important role in the revolution because the revolutionaries want to challenge and end the state's monopoly over the use of force, and they want to establish their own control over the state. Now, methods of overcoming political violence. In our preceding discussion, we have seen the nature and causes of political violence. In this part, we shall study methods of overcoming violence. The state uses three different methods to overcome violence, which are as follows: the remedial method of liberals, which believes in reform; the method of force; the method of carrot and stick policy.